Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out to join our latest episode about the coalface. This time, talking about the young and invisible inside the next generation of cyber fraudsters. Well, look, thank you for giving up an hour of your day today. I appreciate it. There's a lot of content out there on fraud and cybercrime, disputes, investigations. So to give up an hour to spend it with us and or to watch it back on recordings, really grateful. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I'm the founder and managing partner of this law firm Tenet, a small but beautifully formed niche law firm dealing with fraud disputes and investigations. We advise on a number of disputes and investigations out of fraud and financial crime, everything from employee fraud, supply chain fraud, acting for payment service providers, and in another range of cases. We're a mid-market firm, conflict-free, work for clients UK and overseas. Recently named Law Firm of the Year at the Birmingham Law Society Awards, and also LexisNexis have named us one of the leading dispute resolution firms at the moment. Now, the aim at the coalface is to speak to people on the front line of dealing with fraud and financial crime, so we can all learn from their insights to help us anticipate risk. Now, previous episodes will be posted in a link. This is our 15th episode now, and today I'm really fortunate to be joined by the excellent investigative journalist, Kath Okpattah. Kath, thank you so much for taking time to join us. Kath, do you want to give a little introduction about yourself?
Oh gosh, okay. So as Aaron kindly mentioned, I'm an investigative journalist. Not so sure about excellence, but I am dogged. I'm also an author, new author of the book Scam Nation. So I spend my days between writing and on the 6 p.m. news at ITV1, covering crime and working on various investigations. But my main passion seems to be the hole I found myself in seems to be cyber-enabled fraud.
Thanks, Kath. Well, Kath's very modest. Kath is, well, award-winning journalist. I know that much. Youngest presenter of BBC Panorama. I think that's true of you as well. And yes, you say you're the author of this book, Scam Nation, which is a good read, and all the tabs show I've been trying to get through and read it and make some notes for today. So, and it is a really good read, and it's really informative and slightly scary, even for someone who's been dealing with looking at fraud and investigations for 20 plus years like myself. Some housekeeping before we kick off. We had 211 people registered for today. So for those of you who've made it live, thank you very much for giving up your time. You'll get a playback if you're registered. So if you're watching this on playback, thank you for registering. Everybody gets a little ebook or PDF of the learnings of today. And at some point, you'll find towards the end a feedback form. It's always really useful for us to get some feedback on future sessions, how we've done, whether this is working. And lastly, as I always say, we have motion censored lights in our office because we love the environment, which means I tend to do a dance midway through to get the lights back on when it falls out. So usually I read out the 5 kind of areas we're going to talk about before we go through a session, but I want to just dive right into this because we've got quite a lot to get through with Kath in just over 50 minutes for some Q&A. If you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat and I'll pick them up towards the last 5 minutes. Now, we call the first part of this talk for young scammers, understanding what does fraud school look like in the modern world and why do people get involved when they're so young? I'm going to mention some words to start. Falls, clicking, addy, squares, rack. Now, it's fair to say when I first met you, Kath, you're one of the few people in this world of fraud that's made me feel pretty naive because you gave me these words, said, you know what any of this means? And I was like, I don't. And this was kind of part of your build up to your first recordings with Moneybox. And you said people there had the same reaction. They didn't understand. It'd be really good for the audience, I think, just to have an overview about what Scam Nation, the book, is about. But also, why has it taken, Kath, why has it taken you to basically expose this this whole kind of sea of fraudsters hiding in plain sight? So, yeah, over to you.
Okay, so essentially Scam Nation is a collection of all the investigations I've done into the world of fraud, mainly from the point of view of the young people committing it. I say investigations, but it's also a bit of my life story. I grew up at a time where social media was a big thing and still even bigger now for young people. FYI, I'm 25. I know I've aged badly. I dye my hair. But yeah,
Oh, dear.
circa 2014, I remember Instagram had come into circulation. A year after, then we had Snapchat. And so, as well as it was this cool, amazing thing where you can communicate with your friends, gone are the days of BBM, BlackBerry Messenger. It also turned out to be a place where you can glamorize the world of fraud, share tips on how to commit fraud, and also scam people. And in terms of why, I mean, I'm going to be very modest and say I'm not the only person who could have written this book. There are millions of other 20-something-year-olds out there who could have written this book. But I guess it's that age group which offers that perspective of how no longer is fraud this white collar crime being committed by people in call centers or Wolves of Wall Streets. It's teenagers, uh, people as young as 11 I've come across. And so I felt that I had that insight on account of being young, on account of growing up in this social media boom, and on account of nearly falling into the very tempting world that fraud offers. So yeah, that helps.
Yeah, I think it's really insightful because I think that probably would have shocked some people where you said people as younger at the age of 11. I was more shocked that I'm twice your age, so let's park that for the moment.
Not a day over 30, Aaron. Not a day over 30.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, I'll send you the donuts later. But anyway, there's lots of emotion in your book. It is telling your story. I mean, you talk about the relatability of your school days in North London, but then you talk about the guilt of where you basically investigated and trapped someone you call Fuzi. I know that's not their real name, but a young mule herder who we'll talk about later. You've shown a real measure of compassion in your book. You know, the way when I was reading it through, you recognise why some people might get involved in this world. Um, Given that compassion, what drove you to kind of want to expose this part of criminal society? Because it seems you talk about it like some of these your people who you were and may still be your friends. That must have been some tension to say, right, I'm going to lift the lid on this.
Yeah, it's something I struggle with even to this day. My empathy levels are annoyingly too high. But whenever it comes to any sort of fraud investigation involving a young person or 20 to 30-year-old, I always feel it more because I alluded to the fact that I nearly fell into this world. And we see it time and time again throughout history that people, well, some people commit crime simply because that's their only escape. And I'm not saying this is the case for all fraudsters. This is definitely not some sort of apology to fraudsters and criminals. But my experience growing up, that changed a little bit as I got older. But my experience growing up in school was that I went to a very posh a school in a very posh part of London, Highgate, not far from where Karl Marx was buried, two private schools surrounding us. However, the school I went to had a lot of people who grew up, who were living in council estates, who were sharing bedrooms with two siblings, myself included. I shared, it was a two-bedroom flat, and there were three boys sharing one room. So poor us and poor my mother. And I mean, my parents did their very best and continue to do their very best to provide for us. But you could see how bills would be on their mind, rent, being able to afford the school uniform next year. So there was that guilt of wanting to ask for things. And I saw that across many of my classmates, guilt for wanting to ask your parents for things, but also at the same time, that need and that want that all teenagers have, the latest trainers, the PS3, I believe it was at the time,
Right.
um, but no means of getting it apart from this tool, which I have to confess was very easy and is very easy for young people, cyber enabled fraud, because we are masters of technology. We are digital natives. It comes very easy to us. And so when you have people on these social media platforms, people your age, telling you that you can make some quick cash from X, Y, Z, it becomes a very lucrative offer. Oh, I know how to do this. Ooh, this person who I'm following is doing this, and they have the latest pair of trainers, and so I'm going to do that. Where the guilt came from was that I knew that some of the people I'm investigating, Fuzi, who we alluded to, are, are they're not doing this necessarily because they just want to do it. They're doing this because A, they can, and B, they feel like they've been left with no other option. The same way a mother would steal groceries from Tesco's to feed their children at night.
I mean, it's yeah, in that sense, I mean, it's pretty emotive, isn't it? I think um, it's you've got a choice, but you haven't got a choice, and it's, I suppose it's how you play it out. I was
Yeah.
asked on an interview recently about, oh, do you think this was, fraud against some fintechs using sum up transactions, or a customer of a fintech bank? And someone said, oh, do you think it's organised crime? And I said, no, it's going to be probably young people and opportunists.
Mm.
In your book, you jumped out. I mean, you talk in the book about the fraud boys, the F boys, and pretty much what you said, that any person given the right factors can fall into this world. Um, you say you were focused on MMA lessons in the gym, not tech
Always been a
and
weirdo.
clothes. Yeah, no, it's good. My nephew's well into MMA, so I get that. But is it a hard pushback to say to those people, you do have the option? Is that unfair to say, well, you you, you took the low hanging fruit, and if I'm sitting on
Yeah,
my ivory
yeah,
tower, for example?
yeah. And I mean, as much as I empathize with um, young people who go on to commit fraud, I most certainly don't condone it. However, more and more I'm seeing um, people who fall into this world as a safeguarding issue. It's interesting that we
Yeah,
treat county lines, young people who are selling drugs, trafficking drugs across the country, sitting on trains as safeguarding victims. And the same can actually be said for money mules, for example, people who are um, tricked, coerced, enticed into using their bank accounts to hold dirty money for the purposes of the laundry. Young people are impressionable. Um, they are very easy to groom, especially on the internet. And we've seen so many stories about this. It's funny that we're talking about this today on the day that the government are announcing the social media ban, because I think
yeah.
it's come to people's realization that the internet, social media in particular, is this dangerous grooming tool. So yes, they are taking the low hanging fruit, and everyone has a choice. I had a choice, and I didn't go down that route. But at the same time, it's becoming ever more difficult to resist, and sometimes they're committing these crimes without even realizing they're crimes, because the attitudes you see a lot on these social media forums which are discussing fraud is, oh, it's fine, they'll get their money back, the banks will refund
Recover
them.
it.
um, and when you add that narrative with the fact that these people aren't even seeing their victims, it's just it's another mobile phone game for them. It becomes a very hard pill to, well, it becomes a very lucrative pill to say no to.
And I think that point about safeguarding, I don't think many have talked about it in that way, and I think that's really important and insightful. I'm definitely not sitting here thinking, oh, it's really easy to say no, because I imagine some of these fraudsters, young fraudsters, will get goods and give them to their siblings, and they'll give
Mm,
them to their family, and they'll give them the stuff they couldn't have, and they'll take the risk that they might face time for it, or they'll face, but they want to look out for their younger siblings. And you know, I, I can't patronize and say I have any clue what that must be like.
mm,
I'm not in that situation. Never been in the situation, fortunately for me, and I cast myself as very lucky not to be there. But yeah, you talk about, we'll come on to the expose, I suppose, of Tanks, the London scammer in a moment. But you talked about this guy Fuzi, who was, I mean, there's one way, the kind of humorous way we've described him, 18 years old, looked like Mickey Mouse with a hangover. But he was a young mule herder. He wasn't a money mule. He was herding these people, bringing these people together. And, I think you said you were 18, 19 when you exposed this, and you did a piece for Money Box and Radio 4 about that. I mean, 18 years old, and he was coordinating young people. I mean, that's highly impressionable, isn't it? And he was talking about getting 30 grand into somebody's account.
It's so, as much as you see the social media posts saying, give me your, you can make this amount of money if you just buy these details or buy these full financial information. There are also social media posts saying, oh, if you want all these flashy designer things, just do me a favor, give me your bank card. Let me hold it for about 3 days with all the corresponding information, and I'll give you some cash. The people putting those posts out, as you said, are known as mule herders. They use social media to herd money mules, to entice them into engaging into money laundering. And Fuzi was one of them. I mean, I'm assuming he was 18. He could have been younger. But when I sat down, it was a sting operation. I was wearing a secret camera. I was very, very nervous. It was my first ever, first of many secret filmings and sting operations. But his pitch to me was, if you give me the cards that you have, I can deposit £30,000 in it, and you can take a cut. And I was thinking, yeah, right, £30,000. You're trying to sell me one, and maybe he was, but what made me realize that it's very likely that he's dealing with this amount of money was actually when I left. I made my exit because we had enough at that point, and the people who were assigned to me to watch my back told me that these two really big, bulky, muscly, much older men came in looking for me. So that was the first red flag. What the hell is a 18, possibly younger year old doing with people like that? The second red flag was the car they went to. It had a fake number plate on it. And again, what's someone of that age hanging out with those people in a car like that? These are all the telltales of serious organized crime that a young person is going into. And another more tragic, the story I was telling you last week when we spoke, this type of fraud, which starts off on social media, starts off in a very digitalized way, becomes very physical and violent. It's a gateway into very physical and violent crime. I had a friend of mine, I won't say his name, but it's widely publicized now. He sat next to me in English, I believe it was, and same age as me. A couple of months ago in April, I got a press release from the Metropolitan Police saying 26-year-old shot dead in his car in Camden. And the reason that struck out was he's the same age as me. Upon further digging, it turns out that this person was the person I sat next to in English. And once again, it was that penny drop moment of, I knew he did fraud. He was one of many in my school who took part in this type of stuff. And he transitioned from that into joining the gang, being quite a serious capo in that gang, and he met an equally violent fate. So we might think it starts off with Snapchat, it starts off with Instagram, it starts off with being a money mule, maybe herding a mule, but the trajectory is far more dangerous and far more tragic.
Yeah, and it's I can't sit here and pretend to relate. I can't. But it sounds like those individuals who get into this, the entry is easier than the exit. You can't get out.
And just to pick up on that, it's not always a violent fatal exit, but the exit can be difficult in other ways, because if you're very impressionable, these are your formative years that you're starting off in criminality, but there are a few people who I know who started off in that world. They've made it. They have nice normal jobs, but I've realized that they have a tendency to be a bit more blasé with the truth.
Yeah.
um, they're more willing to nick a pastry from Aldi, or shifts funds around in whichever company they're working at, give themselves a little bit of a bonus, scam whichever housing provider they're working for, maybe not declare a certain amount of tax. So they in their heads, I can see it so clearly. In their heads, they're thinking, "Oh, I'm not doing that kind of stuff I used to do when I was 48 in war," but because they did, it seeped into their everyday adult life, and little tiny white crimes, as I call it, um, here and there in their adult life, which if they get caught, is going to be very, very dastardly, and they have more
Yeah.
riding from them now.
I get the concept. I think I wrote something once, an article about silent stealing, and it's all the little frauds we do. From in the corporate environment, you'll have people printing their airline tickets for home, but it's using the office printer. It's a silent steal. Nobody's going to say anything. It's not wrong, or maybe it is a tiny bit, but that's over-egging it. You talked about Fuzi, and one of the other things that shocked me about him was how confident and knowledgeable he was for such a young person in terms of understanding the systems and controls of the bank in question you were talking about. And then obviously the knowledge, as you say, this kind of, I think you called yourselves the digital natives. Um, I'm recounting all the social media sites we've talked about in your book. You talk about Snapchat, Instagram, eBay, Telegram, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, people having a good Snap score, not having a good Snap score, all of that stuff. And it all kind of builds up to this. You talk about the London scammer and the Kim Kardashian of fraud, 150,000 followers. So this chap, Tanks, he's quite the celebrity, or he was quite the celebrity, probably still is, on YouTube. Can you tell us about him and why you really wanted to uncover who he was?
Yeah, so Tanks was he was an influencer. He still is an influencer. But while other influencers will have their products be fitness or fashion, his was fraud. Look at that, FFF. I'll write that down. um, yeah, so he would post videos on TikTok and Instagram. Those were his main platforms. Basically, um, like I said, glamorizing the lifestyle of fraud. So I just bought all of these things. The holder's name was Janine. At first glance, it might be like, oh, what the hell is he talking about? His mum Janine bought this for him. What he really means is the card holder was called Janine, and what he'd done was allegedly um, gone onto a website, bought Janine's card details, known in the slang world as fools, and used those details on an online shopping site to go on an online shopping spree. But he also did stuff like just comical videos, making fraud seem like, oh, it's this nice jokey thing. Um, his most famous video was "This is how I travel around London for free." Proceeds to barge through
Yeah.
the barriers. So he gained a massive following through all of that, and he capitalized on that following by making something known as fraud bibles, which was these not PDF documents, cloud links, which had various documents, various screenshots of how you can commit all the types of frauds that he does, how you can scam the universal income benefit scheme, how you can buy fools credit card details. And a lot of people would watch his videos and think, oh, I want to have what he has. And so I'm going to buy his fraud guide. In terms of how, well, the reason I was quite keen on exposing him. He started this, I'll say, because he went on social media.
He
and
started
decided
it. Okay.
He did. And he's one of the few young fraudsters who I don't have any empathy for whatsoever. But he decided to mock me, and I thought, okay, you're going to mock me to all your followers. I'll mock you on national television. And so I spent a long time. I think it was, I want to say 6 months, but possibly longer. His face was always hidden. And so I'd watch his videos along with my producer in slow motion, frame by frame, looking for clues as to who he was, where he may be, and how I can get there. The first clue was he posted a video which, for a split second, showed the number plates of his car. And from that, we were able to figure out that he was driving a Vauxhall Corsa, not quite the Mercedes he claimed he was driving. The second clue was, again, split second, a picture of his floor. And the voiceover on top of that was, I can see Wembley Park from my apartment. I knew that if I can find this floor, I can find this apartment. He lives somewhere where he can see Wembley Park. He said previously he's a student. So compiling all those bits of information together, I made a list of all the student accommodations which have a view of Wembley Park. There are many. Went
Still
down
wild
there.
goose chase.
Yeah, but somehow we found it. We found first we found the apartment, and what told us that was actually the apartment was the car which we had previously found. The rest is available in Scam Nation.
Yeah, that is true. Well, let's not give away that. But you know, what was really interesting about Tanks, and I think this is how we met. We did the panorama programs together. Didn't understand half the language, but you educated me very quickly. But he was really informative, professional. He was funny. He was engaging. He was waving. I won't say the name of which payment service provider, but he was waving their cards around. He was talking about how easy it was to commit all this fraud. But he was a uni student.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I've learned later on from some sources in law enforcement that he had made quite a bit of cash. Well, more cash than a lot of adults would have seen. But also he tapped into the social media algorithm perfectly. Even though he was discussing criminality and promoting criminality, he did so in a format which lends itself to the algorithm. Therefore, his videos were pushed and his videos were trending and had a greater reach. Therefore, more people potentially not falling victim, but being enticed into this world. Like you said, they were funny, they were quick, and they were engaging. Everything a social media platform video needs to draw in more and more viewers. And majority of those viewers were indeed young people. And this is what we're seeing. I mean, we'll see how the social media ban goes, but criminals who fraudsters who started off young and know how social media works and are still in this world are going to be looking at these apps which are coming up, looking at all the latest developments in TikTok. Instagram and TikTok have changed a lot since I was young, but they can keep up with these changes faster than, dare I say, the social media execs at Meta et al. Can. And so they can package their criminal products, their criminal advertising in a way that appeals to the algorithm before it's clocked as criminal. And by the time it's clocked, they go again because again they are these digital natives who know very well how to game the system.
And that we'll come on to that, I suppose, in a moment. I know you've got your views about social media providers and their role in this, and I think a lot of people out there who might be listening and other organisations doing investigations, it sounds like leading into looking across all these social media platforms in terms of your investigations is more important than ever, because a lot of the perpetrators are active out there. And there's the one side of the equation, which is this content shouldn't be there in the first place. But the other side of the equation is, well, the reality is it is. And we need to be thinking about looking in there much more often and much more frequently with a plan and an understanding. And it sounds like the only way you're going to get that understanding is from someone who's kind of grown up with it. So
yes, well, it's that, and it's also, I mean, I'm not privy fully to how the police operates, but something I call victim intelligence. Um, one thing I'm currently looking into is um, loan sharks on platforms like Reddit,
yeah, okay,
and I think there's Channel 4 documentary out about it tonight. But it's such a thriving industry, especially during a cost of living crisis. But that's one example of how there's all this criminality which is happening seemingly in public, but because I don't want to be too disparaging, so it's just not the natural place to look. And I'll caveat this by saying that the police have become so much better at
yeah,
looking on these platforms for these types of criminality, but criminals are happy to go on social media. Fraudsters are very happy to go on social media and use it as a window shop because they know that most of the time, investigators, debt collectors, the police in some cases are looking in the real world. The reality is, more and more people these days aren't living in the real world, they're living in the digital world.
yeah. And you said you know we'll talk about how people maybe later we'll talk about how people get caught. Everyone leaves a footprint somewhere. Sometimes fraudsters are lazy and they leave their other life, which isn't their fraudster persona life, and some gaps. You mentioned these fraud Bibles. Maybe we can bring that to life a little bit. You talk about these fraud Bibles that Tanks was selling. They're available on social media sites, PDFs, ebooks, online storage. And I'm basically taking this from part of the book. You talk, there's a basic clicking guide for £30, an intermediate guide for 50, a pro guide for 70, an expert guide for £100. And they were saying, like in the pro guide, would teach you, and I'm just reading verbatim, teaches you how to load Monzo, Revolut, and dozens of accounts, and includes everything in the basic and intermediate. Um, the expert guide teaches you how to bang universal credit jobs, i.e., falsely claim universal credit payments, and the national insurance loan method, and it includes everything else in all of the other guides. And all the other guides had lots of things. I think, retailers are mentioned, PayPal, getting refunds. It was pretty extensive. Um, you've kind of mentioned this with the social media side a little bit, but why do you think that these types of fraud Bibles could be sold for so long without intervention? Why? This is why I come back to that first question. It's taken you. Yes, it could have been others who could have investigated it, but you've kind of exposed this, and it seems, well, my God, that was going on, and no one else had really, no one was shouting about it until you came along.
I, why is it taking it so long? If you look at how um, so social media platforms aren't typically selling platforms. I mean, you have Facebook Marketplace and you have TikTok Shop these days. They're not really using that. What they're selling information, and because they're doing it in a way which sort of circumvents the purposes of these platforms, there aren't really the safeguards or the speed cameras to clock what they're doing. And so if I go on TikTok right now and say DM me this link for um, bomb emoji plus book emoji,
Yeah,
that's not really gonna get caught as a I'm selling a manual for how to make a bomb. It'll
yeah,
just be caught as DM me for emoji. And it's the same with fraud Bibles. It's not being flagged as this step by step guide on how to commit fraud because it's hidden behind the messaging. And it goes back to what I was saying about social media is the perfect way to hide in plain sight because you can hide behind messaging, which algorithms and people may not necessarily be privy to. I guess the best way is to build a sort of database to flag these things. And when we did our investigation, we told Instagram about these terms, and then they took them down. But what happens is slang ever evolving. There might come a time where I'm not privy to these terms as well. Hence why I have a son. No, I kid. But you shut down one term, you shut down one pathway, and they'll just come up with another one. It's so hard to permanently put the lid on this type of selling of criminal activity.
I think that's fair. It's that kind of speed of resurrection in a different format, isn't it? And as soon as you can understand all the emojis and all the kind of language and the translation, they'll translate and they'll talk in a different language, and it's so it may well be down about the users and maybe the monitoring of that. You exposed a few things in your book. You talked about an investigation into, again, not real name, Myaz, and the OTP agency. You talked about iSpoof and TJ Fletcher, who was prosecuted for that. Just to help people on the webinar, what do these two organizations, let's call them, OTP agency, had a LinkedIn account. What did the iSpoof and OTP agency do, which made perpetration of fraud so vast so quickly?
So number spoofing is a very vital part of the fraud anatomy. If you can trick someone that you are a legitimate industry, a legitimate company, or even a legitimate person, then you're one big step closer to getting them to part from their money. What used to be the case was that you'd have these SMS farms, SMS blasters, or you'd be sitting in your bedroom calling people individually one by one, having spoofed your number. What OTP agency and iSpoof were doing, iSpoof as the name suggested, they automated this service. There was a fraud for payment service where if you buy a monthly subscription, all you had to do was put in the person you wanted to call, put in the number and the organization you wanted to pretend to be from, and the iSpoof or OTP agency's system would do the rest. So let's say I put in your number and to call, and I put in, I don't know, one of your colleagues' number. iSpoof would then call you, and it would show up on your phone as your colleague's number, classic number spoofing, and then try and get you to part from your number but money by either saying, oh, you've just been sent a one-time passcode, which in a lot of cases the victims generally had, because these scammers had actually tried to use their card and they've been met by two-factor authentication. So iSpoof and OTP agency were using the service to bypass that two-factor authentication by getting people to part with their one-time passcodes. What's scary is, after I exposed both iSpoof and OTP agency, another one popped up, and it was far better. I'd say iSpoof iOS 10, because not only did it offer a number spoofing service, it also offered a cold music service, much like a legitimate organization would do, but it also gave you the option to voice clone. So I could be calling from this service, Russian Comms, with the name of this new organization. You'd think it was me. It wasn't, but not only would it have my number there, but it would also sound like me, and so you're more inclined to. It's terrifying. Terrifying. I tried it with a few of my colleagues. I'd pretend to be my editor, and let's call her Imogen, and people would answer saying, "Hi, Imogen." I'd say, "Hello, X," and it would actually sound like Imogen. And then I'd proceed to say, "Oh, could you send me this email about X, Y, and Z?" And they would.
I mean, for anyone who's not thought about that, that's about as scary as it gets, isn't it? You've got Cavs calling me, Cavs talking to me. I'm doing this expose. What do you know about it? I give you away confidential information. Well, I couldn't do that anyway, but I'll give you some information. And really, it's the people behind it. I mean, that's and I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because when we kind of come to this end of this part of the book where you expose people, and I think involved in this, you round up this part of the book by talking about how addictive a place Scam Nation is to be involved in or you're a part of, and we see out there, don't we, lots of awareness and education campaigns for people not to become a victim of fraud and all the interventions from the banks. I think I was chatting to you about it last week. I'm starting to get to a place in my head that I'm thinking, these interventions are kind of great, but they're just an awareness thing. If you really think you know somebody, you really think you know the transaction you're dealing with, you really understand everything about it, there's nothing someone's going to say to you to take you off course. So how do how do people, and now if you say you could be spoofed and it'll be by someone you understand and recognize and the voice of, how do we intervene on ourselves despite everything being comfortable? And it's the same, like maybe for some of these people who've gone into the criminal world, how do they just stop themselves? I mean, that's a behavioral science thing, probably beyond you and me. But do you think we're getting to that stage now that actually, look, it doesn't matter how much education's out there at the moment. It doesn't matter what people are doing in intervention. It's going to come down to the people themselves to go, you know what, everything looks safe. I look left, I look right, I look left again. I can't hear anything. I can't see anything. I'm just going to take an extra bit of time and just think about, is that where we're getting to?
I think all the messaging has really paid off because I think people are more paranoid now and more aware that there are people out there trying to scam you. The issue is that we're living faster paced lives and we kid ourselves into thinking we know what scams look like. I'm very guilty of this because last year I fell for I fell for a phishing scam where I gave away my Instagram login and password. I know, very embarrassing. But
so at least you're talking about it.
Yeah, it was during the moments where we were all getting ready to leave the house, and I think my son was doing something. I just thought, well, I'll go onto Instagram very briefly and just see what messages I have. But they caught me at the right time. They caught me at a time where I was distracted, and it's hard to know what can be done to stop people to take a beat and think about something when they're doing something that's so natural, so part of their everyday lives. As much as there's that caution out there these days, our society and our way of life has changed so much. I mean, I guess the one thing you could do, you could be more doubtful, but again, how does that help when
Not a nice way to live as well, is it? If
it's
you
not, it really
as
isn't.
a constant pessimist and
Yeah,
skepticism. But
yeah.
I think in the face of the type of technology and the ability out there to fraud people, um, I just think some thought needs to be given to. There's only so much the banks can do. There's only so much social media companies can do to intervene because of the speed of let's call it the resurrection of themes and communications. What more is it can we do as businesses, as people, be it in the moment interventions, or at least having the tools to know, we know in the case of a medical emergency, we'll dial 999. Do we know that we'll dial 159 for the bank straight away if we've got this issue? I think there's something in that. Not for an answer for today.
Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. Go on, Kath.
Well, I was going to say one thing which I've realised is technology can read technology better than we can, and we're seeing it more and more with AI. AI recognizes AI, and I was very happy when I started getting alert on my phone telling me the suspected spam call because I wouldn't have known that. But there is technology out there which can spot scams in the same way that when you're making a transaction, the bank will say the card details don't match. This could be a scam. Often you've typed in the person's name wrong. But I think tech companies need to be, and we as people outside of that industry need to lobby tech companies more to create further technology to recognize the bad forms of code, the potential scams, because they can. They're building these wonderful, amazing inventions. The issue, I believe, for them is there's no profit incentive in making technology that can spot a scam. However, it's very helpful for banks. It's very helpful for online shopping sites because it's a product loss, but they're not dealing with that kind of stuff. They're not dealing with banking transactions. They're not dealing with loss of stock. But if we really start to pile the pressure on, they'll realize, oh, okay, this kind of stuff is affecting our user base, and so we should probably code some sort of AI which can recognize any type of scam and block any victim from transferring their money or purchasing a product which isn't real.
Yeah, I've seen some software out there which is trying to help intervene as become like a scam checker, they call it, and it makes sense though, because I think a lot of times, you know, we talk about fraud and it's almost like it's been left to chance to find. And you talked about how the police are now moving, in your perspective anyway, from a reactive nature to, once the crime's committed, to disruption, which aligns with what's happening in terms of the government's fraud strategy. So Kath, you brought a lot to light at, may I say, a young age, and well above and beyond your years. Certainly when I was 25, God knows what I was probably doing then. But if you were the fraud minister,
oh gosh,
yeah, if you were the fraud minister, mate, you what would your priorities be? You know, I didn't prep you for this one, but so you may go, oh, man, I don't know at the moment, but
what would my? I'd say I'd have two priorities. The first would be to changing people's attitudes to fraud. I mean, yes, it's all well and good going up against the big cases, the cases where people have lost money. But I think there's some research from CIFAS, who I believe are on this call, showing that there was a poll and majority of people said yes, they would commit certain types of fraud. And so my first priority would be to change those attitudes, because that goes throughout the whole of society, not just the young people who are being enticed on social media, but the people who are also fiddling with their tax returns just to make a few savings here and there.
Yeah.
The second would be to, like I said earlier, really lobby these tech companies into just using their skills and their know-how as a force for good. And I mean, I know they might say that this we're basically working for free to build something which isn't our domain, but it is their domain, because if someone gets scammed on Instagram, they're not going to use Instagram anymore. And if loads of people are being scammed on Instagram, they're not going to use Instagram anymore. So there is that. There is a mandatory incentive and a user-based incentive to build scam checker tools. My third priority. Oh gosh, it's all coming here.
See, I've got you sorted. You should apply.
Would just be to the same way that we're now treating county lines as a safeguarding issue. Obviously, it's case by case basis, but do the same for particularly money mules and mule herders. The carrot stick approach, the stick of CIFAS's marker, I think is very effective, and it's a very good deterrence. But also there are some cases where people they've been groomed into this world, and that goes to law enforcement as well. Just consider whether or not this might be a safeguarding issue, not just a criminal one.
Okay, that's really, really helpful. I've got a couple more questions, and we'll get some Q&A around it. But these are from my kind of notes. You talk in the book about OTP agency and so on, and you know, those who've been brought to the law. You talk about the Fraud Act, Serious Crime Act, Proceeds Crime Act, Online Safety Act. If you feel free enough to say it, what's your honest view about the state of the law around fraud in terms of ability to prosecute and sentencing?
So when we met, I'd say it was disastrous and terrible. Now, I think they're doing a bloody good job.
Good on you.
I really think they are. For example, iSpoof, the way in which the Metropolitan Police and the NCA revealed to the world that they had busted iSpoof was impressive. They took their own animated promotional video,
it's
changed it into welcome to iSpoof. If you've been using this, we've been watching you. You could see people leaving the chats just dropping like dead flies. And it's that kind of thing, that kind of using the fraudsters' own advertising techniques against them, that really sends shockwaves throughout this criminal world and makes people think twice about doing this. They're also talking to people like myself. I was very surprised when, in one of my more recent fraud investigations, I was told to essentially hold off by the NCA because they too were investigating them, and we sort of worked in tandem to figure out a way where we can really splash this expose. They're talking to white hat hackers, boutique intelligence firms about the kind of stuff they're seeing. The intelligence gathering is getting far better. The only issue, and I'm not sure how to solve this just yet, is fraud is becoming a young person's game, and by virtue of that type of age, it's also more grassroots, and it's very difficult to not just legislate but prosecute and investigate when something's so grassroots and it's just popping up. It's like a scrappy fighter when it's a young person committing fraud. It's quite scrappy, and I found this with Tanks and other young fraudsters.
Does it feel a bit like whack-a-mole?
Yeah. You never know where the next one's going to pop up.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. I think if anyone's got questions for Kath, if you could just pop them in the chat. I'm going to keep chatting for a bit and then do a round, but see if there's any questions on there. I know someone from SciFast has put on a really useful link about fraud acceptance hits tipping point as half of 50% of UK adults say first-party fraud is reasonable. I can't read the remainder of the link, but it's anything from Rachel at SciFast you should read. If you hear her speak, you should go and listen to her. Early in the book, Kath, you made a comment that you'd only ever come across one or two female fraudsters. And do you stand by that this many years on since those early investigations? Is this a male-dominated area?
It's so hard to know when most of them are hidden behind anonymous accounts. However, I would say I'm treading very carefully. I saw this with myself. I'm seeing this with my 2-year-old son. Boys have a high attitude to risk, threshold for risk than girls do. So maybe, but I definitely don't know.
It's hard to say. No research on it yet. No. And very quickly, what's the next book going to be about?
It's going to be a love story. It's way out. It's possibly my toughest investigation yet, but it's looking at attitudes to interracial and intercultural relationships. So investigating love.
Okay, that sounds really interesting. Kath, thank you. That has gone ridiculously fast, and just really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much for giving up your time and your insights. There is a question in there I'm going to ask you from. You can have a little look. You'll scroll. You'll find a question from somebody in there, which I'm going to mention in a second. For everyone, Paula has posted a link to Kath's book in the chat. I think there's some opportunities to get that on discount at some point. We're going to send out links for that as well. Kath also, much like us, he does training. He can be booked for conference speaking. He can be booked for education. I think you can hear he's really insightful and really knowledgeable. I think if your organisation wants something different to talk about in your internal talks around fraud, please get in touch with Kath. He's exactly as he appears on screen. He's a really nice, wonderful human being. Next episode, we have not pinned down exactly yet on who. It's going to be on the 20th of July. I'm trying to squeeze one in before the summer at 1 p.m. So Monday, the 20th of July. It's either going to be on learning how to horizon scan, basically work out what's around the corners before you see it, or it's going to be a further kind of talk around whistleblowing and really how do you get people to speak up more often. So please book in for that. Kath, we'll finish on the question you've seen. Do you think the exposing of tanks has ultimately helped or hindered your career?
Firstly, hello, Paul. Long time no see. Such a throwback. Do I think it helped or hindered his career? I think it helped his life. And it's funny, one of his recent YouTube videos, which aren't to do with fraud, he, amidst the profanity and this calling me every name under the sun, he actually admitted that exposing him helped him stay onto the right path, go onto the right path and give up his life of fraud. Only he knows whether or not he's truly done so. In terms of his career, I think it's helped him because he's now a prominence-ish YouTuber, and he managed to capitalize on his fraud followers and also the BBC panorama. Everyone knew him as Tags the Fraudster who got exposed, and there's no such thing as bad press. Especially in that world.
No, I guess so. And I guess spin is the art of marketing, really, isn't it? So, well, with that in mind, Kath, look, we've had a lot of people stay on. Thank you, everyone who's given up your time to attend. I hope it's been a useful and informative session. Please stay in touch with us, myself, the firm. By all means, follow Kath, find him on LinkedIn. And if there's any other information you'd like from us, please do get in touch. But for now, thank you, everybody, for taking time to join us. I'll give you 2 minutes of your day back. Thanks, everyone.